On the night of May 25th, 1995, something strange and incredibly alien was lurking in the skies over the immense plains that lie between the towns of Bovina, Texas, and Tucumcari, New Mexico. We only know about this eerie and mysterious visitor thanks to the eagle-eyed crew of Cactus 564, an America West flight that was completing the final leg of its journey from Tampa, Florida to Las Vegas, Nevada. What they saw in the night skies over eastern New Mexico, silhouetted against the bright flashes of lightning in an immense thunderstorm, was something so enormous and so terrifying that it triggered a flurry of frenzied communications between air traffic control, other commercial airliners in the area, a military pilot, Air Force bases, and even NORAD itself. In plain terms, the crew of Cactus 564 witnessed the UFO to end all UFOs that stormy May evening, a gigantic alien mothership the likes of which few have ever seen before or since. The mystery of what the object was and whither it went has never been solved. But one thing is for sure, it wasn't the first otherworldly visitant to this part of the American West, and it certainly wasn't the last. This is the story of the Cactus 564 UFO incident, otherwise known as the Bovina UFO. Flying at night is an unforgettable experience. The cold stars in the sky above, the glittering lights of towns and cities below, and every so often a flashing thunderstorm in the distance. These are the things one expects to see, but what the flight crew of America West Flight 564 saw on the night of May 25th, 1995 was completely unexpected, and it was something they will never forget. The story begins at around 9:25 p.m. as the routine flight arrowed through the skies over West Texas, near the small town of Bovina, close to the border with New Mexico, at a cruising altitude of about 39,000 feet. The flight crew was enjoying the lightning show put on by a massive thunderstorm far off to the northeast, when a flight attendant noticed something very unusual, a series of lights that flashed in a very regular pattern and were apparently somewhere between Flight 564 and the thunderstorm. The flight attendant's exclamations of surprise drew the attention of First Officer John J. Waller, who observed the objects and later described them as 8 very bright, bluish-white lights which flashed in a repeating sequence from left to right. He estimated the altitude of these lights to be at around 30,000 to 35,000 feet. By this time, the flight's captain, Eugene Tollefson, wanted to know what all the excitement was about, so he left his seat to observe the strange and inexplicable phenomenon for himself. Like the flight attendant and his first officer before him, he witnessed the lights, but he saw something else that caused the hairs on the nape of his neck to stand on end. A few fortuitous flashes of lightning in the thunderstorm behind the lights revealed to Captain Tollefson something that he was scarcely prepared to accept. The lights weren't separate objects at all, but were elements of a single enormous craft of some kind. Silhouetted by the streaks of lightning was what looked to be a massive, cigar-shaped UFO that the captain guessed was anywhere between 300 to 500 feet long. And that's when the flurry of radio communications began. Eager to understand what they were seeing, First Officer Waller made contact with the Albuquerque FAA Air Route Traffic Control Center. What followed was a frantic round-robin of communications between Cactus 564, Albuquerque Air Traffic Control, Cannon Air Force Base near Clovis, New Mexico, and F-117A Nighthawk, and NORAD. Fortunately, thanks to the investigative legwork of Walter N. Webb of the UFO Research Coalition, we can eavesdrop on much of this fascinating conversation.
Okay, can you give me a radio and
Okay, off of Holloman, it is 038 for 283.
283, huh?
I mean, it's about 10 degrees off of what you gave me before and about...
Center, Cactus 564.
Cactus 564, guys.
Yeah, off to our 3 o'clock. Getting some strokes out there. Can you tell us what it is?
I'll tell you what, that's some, right now, I don't know what it is right now. There is a restricted area that's used by the military out there in the daytime.
Yeah, it's pretty odd.
Hold on, let me see if anybody else knows around here.
Cactus 564, can you paint that object at all?
Cactus 564, no I don't. And talking to the 3 or 4 guys around here, no one knows what that is. We've never heard about that.
But nobody's painting it at all?
Okay, Cactus 564, say again?
There's nothing on the radars on the other centers at all on that particular area, that object that's up in the air?
It's up in the air?
Affirmative.
altitude about?
I don't know, probably right around 30,000 or so, and it's with a strobe, it starts going counterclockwise, and the length is unbelievable.
Cannon 21.
Cannon, go ahead.
Hey, do you guys know if there was anything like a tethered balloon or anything released that should be above tie band?
No, we haven't heard nothing about it.
Okay. Guy at 39,000 says he sees something at 30,000 that the length is unbelievable and it has a strobe on it. This is not good.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's a UFO, so it's that Roswell crap again.
Where's it at now?
He says it's right in tie band.
It's right in time. No, we haven't seen nothing like that.
Okay, keep your eyes open. Texas 564, we checked with Cannon. They don't have any weather balloons or anything up tonight. Nobody up front knows any idea about that. You still see it?
A negative. That's where we initially spotted it. It was between the weather and us, and when the lightning, you could see a dark object, and it was pretty eerie looking.
Okay.
First time in 15 years I've ever seen anything like it.
Said it was about 30,000. Cactus 564, you still?
Okay, fine. In the next about 2 to 3 minutes, be looking off to your right side. If you see anything about 30,000 feet, one aircraft reported something. It wasn't a weather balloon or anything. It was a long, white-looking thing with a strobe on it. Let me know if you see anything out there.
38, any traffic on my left lane right now?
I've got something passing off to your 9 o'clock in about 12 at 31 westbound.
That's a little about a little lower enough to set up our left lane. Albuquerque 564 is last time. Just for our notes, we're going to take a miss. Was that in a restricted area? That was just basically south of
You guys don't know anything about some kind of a weather balloon or UFO that's out in the vicinity of Fort Sumner tonight, do you?
I don't think so. Stand by.
Okay.
At this point, the answer to that question is no.
Albuquerque 564 is last time. Just for our notes, we're going to take a miss. Was that in a restricted area? That was just basically south of Terry when we reported it.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
Yeah, I didn't know if you happen to know of anything going on out there. No balloons in the area, no nothing reported.
Okay, where is this at again?
It's at, well, you know where it's in Tucumcari, New Mexico. It's about 150 miles to the east of Albuquerque.
Okay, how far from Holloman?
Holloman, it looks like it's off the 030 Holloman for about 220 miles.
Okay, I think. Okay, it's kind of hard for us to see here. Okay, 030 for about 200. We don't have anything going on
Yeah.
that I know of.
Yeah, I didn't know. We've tried everybody else, and nobody else is. This guy definitely saw it run all the way down the side of the airplane. Said it was a pretty interesting thing out
Okay,
there.
it was at 30,000 feet.
30,000 feet.
It was like long.
Yeah, it's right out of the X-Files. I mean, it's a definite UFO or something like that. But I mean,
Y'all are serious about this.
yeah, he's real serious about it too. And he looked at it, saw it. No balloons are reported tonight. Nothing in the
And it
area.
was strobing out the front, he said?
I think the strobe was off the tail end of it.
Okay, strobe tail.
He said it was kind of, well, it was dark, but he said there was lights in it.
How long did he think it was?
He said it was 300 to 400 foot long.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And we don't have any air carriers out here, so they're strobing along.
The only thing that I could see, it would sound like an aerostat, but I don't think ours are that big, though.
Yeah, no, and they're more like a blimp rather than this sounded like some sort of a flying hot dog or something.
And did he say, like, how big around kind of?
No, he didn't really have an idea of how big around it was.
So kind of like a plane without wings.
Yeah, sort of like that.
Yes, we had someone call here earlier about a pilot spotting an unidentified flying object.
Yep, that's us.
Okay, well, hey, we're tracking a search-only track kind of where that might have happened.
The identity of the object seen by the crew of Flight 564 was never established to anyone's satisfaction. The usual suspects, of course, have trotted out the old Venus theory, essentially claiming that the crew of Flight 564 misidentified a few celestial bodies, which apparently tend to flash in regular and sequential patterns. But there's never any explanation as to why celestial bodies form a bulky, cigar-shaped mass capable of occluding the lightning in a distant thunderstorm. But no one really buys that theory anyway. Meanwhile, The air traffic controller at Albuquerque allegedly told Walter Webb of the UFO Research Coalition that he followed up with NORAD the day after the incident and learned something very interesting. Apparently, they tracked an object shortly after the reported sighting by Flight 564, something very large and stationary, which accelerated several times in brief bursts of high velocity between 1,000 and 1,400 miles per hour before abruptly stopping. It's a strange story, and maybe we'll never know what the astonished crew of that America West flight saw that night in late May of 1995. And it's worth pointing out its cylindrical shape isn't all that unusual in the UFO literature. Hell, cigar-shaped UFOs in New Mexico and the Southwest go back all the way to the late 19th century at least, to the great airship scare of the 1890s. And the Bovina UFO bears more than a passing resemblance to the object described in the so-called Childs-Whitted UFO Encounter near Montgomery, Alabama in 1948. But where the Bovina Encounter differs is the sheer size of the object. At 300 to 500 feet long, it has to be without question one of the largest UFOs on record. So who knows? Perhaps it was an alien mothership, scouting out the American Southwest for a suitable landing spot. Or maybe they, whoever they are, enjoy observing the spectacular thunderstorms of the Great Plains just as much as we do. Anyhow, if you've seen anything like the Bovina UFO in the vicinity of the Texas-New Mexico borderlands, or anywhere else for that matter, please tell us all about it in the comments below.